Macron's government has reportedly been exploring a new national lockdown starting midnight Thursday, one, though, that could be more flexible than the 2-month shutdown France saw in the spring. Well, to talk a bit more about this with me now, I'm joined on the set by France 24's Philip Turle. Philip, France now has the highest infection rate in Europe. Hospitals are beginning to struggle with numbers of new patients that are on the rise. What are these different possibilities that could come out tonight?
Okay, well, one thing I think all the government members are agreeing about is that the situation has spiraled out of control in France over the past couple of weeks, as you were saying, the highest infection rate in Europe. So the government feels it has to do something, and it's got to strike hard to try to bring down the number of infections. So there are a number of deciding factors to begin with that President Macron looks at every day. We can see them here. The number of infections per 100,000 inhabitants, that's on the way up. The number of people testing positive, 33,400 on Tuesday, slightly less than 52,000 on Monday, but still way too high. And the number of patients in intensive care, they now occupy 57% of beds in hospital. So that means there are less and less free beds for people suffering from other illnesses. So whatever the president does, and he looks at these figures, he sees they're getting worse and worse by the day. So he has got to make some kind of manoeuvring and move to make sure that this infection rate doesn't spread further. So there are possible new measures which are under consideration tonight. The first one that seems to be the favourite is that President Macron is going to announce a new nationwide 1-month lockdown between the 1st and the 30th of November. But he may also just extend the curfew. Our current curfew comes into effect at 9 p.m. till 6 a.m. That might be brought back 2 hours from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. and then introduced all day at the weekend. It's sure that there will be more working from home. Only 1 out of 3 French workers is being asked to go into the office. The rest are being advised to work from home. And the third one is the closure of universities, but it looks like primary schools will be left open. Now, there are a couple of things that are unclear. We don't know whether we're going to be allowed to travel in France between different regions, how far that shutdown is going to limit travel, and also when those measures are going to be introduced. Some say Thursday midnight, others are talking about this weekend.
Now, a big question here, of course, is the French economy and what kind of effect all of this might have on that.
Well, that's not very good news either, I'm afraid. If you look at the figures for earlier this year, during the first lockdown between March and May, there was a fall of 9% in the economy. It went up by about 16% over the summer. There was a real boost in sales, but it's already started falling again by 5%. So analysts from INSEE, the French statistics organization, say they're expecting a 9% recession in France over 2020. And they're also expecting an increase in the overall unemployment rate, which could go up to at least 10%. Now, as we've been hearing from our economics department at France 24, the estimate cost of a month's lockdown in France is going to be between 15 and 20 billion euros for the French state, because they're going to have to come up with measures to help pay for all those people whose companies have come to a standstill or who can't go to work.
Philip, just very briefly, France obviously not the only country in Europe that's suffering with this surge in cases. Just talk us through the situation elsewhere.
Well, if you want to go travelling in Europe, Jeannie, then I think the best thing to do at the moment is just forget it, because it's getting more and more difficult. For example, you'll either need a negative COVID test for some countries. You'll need to be in quarantine for others. Sometimes you're going to need 2. If you look at this map here, all the countries that are in pink are countries that have a high COVID rate where restrictions are in place. You'd have to go to the Scandinavian countries really to get away from it all and to have more of a chance of travelling. Some countries are completely closed down. And even if you do manage to travel and you get there, you'll be handicapped by the measures that have been brought in those countries. For example, in France, if there's a lockdown, you can't go out during the day and go visiting museums or anything like that. So it's not really worth travelling. And we've seen that measures are being brought in all over Europe. For example, in Italy, where there is now a curfew from 6 p.m. There have been riots there in the street between Turin in the north right down as far as Naples to protest against these more stronger measures that the country has decided to bring in to try to clamp down against coronavirus. And in Belgium, for example, now the return to schools after the half-term break is being delayed to try to stem also the spread of the virus. So wherever you go in Europe, not only Europe, unfortunately, the situation is not very good. good. So the main advice seems to be just really, if you can, to stay in your own country and to stay at home.
Philip, thanks for that. France 24's Philip Turle.